Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Guidance Corner. My name is Christelle, and in this week's discussion, we're going to be talking about being in the flow. We hear this so often, being in the flow. I use it a lot in my discussions. We hear it on social media, we hear it in meditations. What does it mean? What does it mean to be in the flow? And how do we actually know that we are in the flow? And I'm going to talk more on that because sometimes when we're in a comfort zone or when we're in denial, it can actually feel very similar to being in the flow. There are differences, and that's how we'll be able to know whether we are in one state in the flow or in another state like a comfort zone. So, in starting this discussion, I want to make a point here that I want to be very clear. When we say we are in the flow, being in the flow, it starts as a state of being. So before we can act from a place of being in the flow, we first must be in the flow. So saying it out aloud, it makes sense. We kind of go, well, of course. But when we dive deeper into this, when we look at sometimes how we attempt to find this being in the flow, we actually notice that it's something that we can chase. It's something that we can try to hold on to. And all that is actually the opposite of being in the flow. So sometimes the very desire to access that state of flow puts us into actions that do not come from a state of flow. So we are essentially chasing something in a way that we'll never be able to attain it. So why is this so important? Why is being in the flow so important to us as human beings? And the first reason, being very obvious, is that when we are in a state of flow, we function better, we feel better. Going back to my video on resistance, there's less resistance, or there's maybe even no resistance. Without accessing a state of flow, coming into a state of non-resistance is very, very difficult. So this state of flow, being in the flow, is so important to us as we move through life. So we know that the state of flow first starts in us being. What does being mean? It's how we are. It's our energy. It's how we react and respond. It's this place of being. So we access being, and that's why it's called being in the flow. It's not really doing in the flow. It's just we are being in the flow. It means that our being, our self, mind, body, spirit, emotions are in the flow, in a state of flow. And let's look at the word flow for a minute here. I notice I'm using my hands a lot and they're flowing. It's in a state of movement, in a state of fluidity almost. I'm picturing a river as I say this. There's constant movement. Now, being in the flow doesn't mean that we are constantly moving or striving or doing. being in the flow, I just got this image of a bendy reed. And that's really a perfect analogy. There's this swaying and movement with what comes our way. So when we are being in the flow, things out, external things can come to us. And when we are flowing, their impact doesn't hit us as to when we're being a brick wall or an oak tree. You know, their impact will come and we might sway one way, kind of like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. But we are not so rigid in our being that it hits us like a brick. It hits us like we are a brick wall. Okay, so I hope you can get the feeling of how different that feels. Things will still surprise us. Things will still make us, oh, I don't like that. And immediately we might put up a wall. But the more we can be in that state of flow, the more we will feel, oh, I wasn't expecting that. Let me sit with it a minute. Rather than, I am only expecting this, so whatever comes, my mind is already closed. That's that brick wall. That's that oak tree analogy where we are rigid in an idea of how something should be. So going back to the video of assuming, we've already made all our assumptions. And when something comes to us, when something hits us, it better be in line with the assumption, or we are going to reject it. We are going to push back rather than flowing and allowing it to come in and being in a space where we can sit with it. Two very, very different energies. So just in discussing that flow, the bendy reed and the sturdy oak tree, and there are times where we need both. Okay, so being in the flow doesn't mean that we reject the oak tree or the brick wall. We acknowledge. Being in the flow means we accept. So now that we can kind of see this, how I'm using this term and what we're talking about here today, I want to look at how do we know when we're in the flow? How do we know that we're in the flow as opposed to being in a comfort zone or being in denial or even being in that energy where we're so overwhelmed, we are so almost bamboozled by life that we've given up. We are just in a state of, I can't take any more. And there's an energy where it feels like the bendy reed, but it's actually the oak tree that has, I don't want to sound too dramatic here, but the oak tree that has broken. We can find ourselves, and I'll probably do a video on this, everyone, because it's quite important. Sometimes we can find ourselves in a place where we are, the situations in our life, the people in our life, life itself has affected us so much that we've broken down, and it can feel like a very zen place. It can feel like a very in the flow place, but it's actually a place of, I can't handle this anymore. And we break down. And there's a lot of a difficulty in that, but there's a lot of beauty in that as well. That's us being cracked open. But that's a topic for another time that I promise I'll do a discussion on because it's fascinating. It's so interesting, and so painful and difficult when we find ourselves there because it can be so confusing. So that's the oak tree that has broken. It's not quite the bendy reed. So going back, how do we know that we're in the flow? So we know that the flow is an energy of acceptance. It's swaying and moving with what comes and goes in our life. And I like that analogy of the movement because it's not an energy of, I don't care. I don't care what happens. That's more that broken oak energy. It's you've broken down and now it's like, I don't care what happens. I'm so done. I don't care. That's not being in the flow because there's no movement. You're allowing what happens to happen, but it comes from a place of being rigid and broken rather than being in the flow. Because this energy of flow is so interesting because when things come to us, it enables us to flow. So we might be taken back. So when we're in that energy of flow, we don't get hit by things face on. We might get taken back. And in that movement, we can kind of go, oh, I'm surprised. I wasn't expecting that. I'm going to have to think on this. I don't know how I feel about this. There's that unknown that we tap into. There's also that thing's leaving, or, oh, and we move forward to almost follow it, but we don't quite. We don't grab hold of it. We kind of move in the direction that things are going. So sometimes things leave us and we might find ourselves leaning into that. Sometimes things come to us and we might find ourselves leaning back as that arrives. And that's the flow. It doesn't mean that we have 100% certainty. It doesn't mean that we're okay with everything that happens, but it means that we are in a state to accept what's happening. Doesn't mean we like it, doesn't mean we don't like it, but we are automatically in a, oh, that's leaving. I feel sad. I feel afraid. Oh, I'm not sure if I like that leaving. I knew it had to go, but now that it's going, oh, I don't know how I feel. So it puts us in a state where we question. There's not immediate refusal or denial or rejection. We allow it to come into our space. And in doing so, we allow ourselves to feel. How do we feel about that? So, how do we access this flow? It's a state of being, but we are in this physical world as well. So, we are beings, but our physical world makes it that we are also doing. Okay, so there needs to be this flow in between the being aspect of us and the doing aspect of us. So accessing the flow, like I said earlier, is a state of being. So we access it through being. Now, interestingly enough, we access it by doing things that help us in our being because we're linked to both. There's a beautiful saying that I think it's Japanese in origin, but don't quote me on that. And it's it talks about meditation and meditation being action without action. And I wish I could remember where I saw this because it's very interesting. Meditation is action. We are meditating, we are doing something, but meditation brings us to the inaction. And being in the flow, accessing the flow, that's what we need to do. We need to find those actions that bring us to inaction. And like I said earlier, meditation. So, meditation, anything that enables us to still our mind, to quieten our thoughts, to release the assumptions, to release the resistance, to release, it will not even release, but to almost help us dismantle that brick wall, to help us soften the oak, to become more like the bendy reed. So journaling is a great one as well. So again, it's a doing, but it's a doing that brings us into our space of being. Journaling helps us get what's in our mind down on paper so we can see it. Anytime the mind is in a whirl or the mind is not flexible, the mind has its rigid thoughts, journaling enables us to get that from our mind down on paper where we can see it. And that helps us then work on that aspect of ourselves. So it's our inner work. It's working on our sense of being. So now I just want to share a little story that I went through a few years ago. And it's probably one that I'm going to keep coming back to quite a bit in these discussions because I feel that sharing a little bit about myself, about my story, actually helps to highlight what these discussions are about, how it shows us, it helps us see what I'm trying to say here, what this is about. So a few years ago, I fulfilled a big, big dream of mine, and it was to go and live in Europe and the Netherlands in particular. So I left and went with my partner, and it was this big dream. And we spent over a year organizing it, selling everything and organizing ourselves to go over there. And it was this huge bucket list. It was during COVID, so it was not a good time to do this, but we were so regimented in what we wanted to do. We were going to do it no matter what. And very quickly after arriving, my world unraveled. So already I had left a good job, I had left my family, we had sold all our belongings. And so already I had to let go of a lot of things. And then when I got to the Netherlands, my relationship unraveled as well. So he went his way and I went my way. And it was extremely painful. Now, somehow in that process, I found myself in the flow. I don't know if it's because I had already let go of so many things in leaving Australia and moving to the Netherlands that I was already in this acceptance of things come and things go and things get replaced. Maybe not straight away, but there's this flow. And I felt I felt the benefits of being in the flow as we were leaving Australia. I felt that as sad as it was, and there was fear and uncertainty, there was this sense of if I want the next stage of my life to unfold, I need to allow this stage of my life to fall away. So I was already very much in the flow in moving over there, apart from the COVID thing, which I was very not in the flow about, or we might have delayed it. We might have looked at that differently. But let's not that opens up another whole can of worms. So we won't talk about that today. So the relationship fell apart, and I realized, well, staying in the Netherlands, I hadn't found a job, I hadn't started my own business yet. The dream, I could feel it slipping away. And I found myself meditating a lot, I would just listen to music and just sit. And I found that the only doing, I mean, I still had to cook and eat and shop and things like that. So there was the doing the for our survival, for our everyday life. But all the other doing, all the other chasing fell away. I found myself in these quiet moments. I love to knit and crochet, and I I took that up, and I was crocheting or knitting every day. I was meditating. I was in this very quiet space, it felt very zen, and I don't use that word lightly, but it felt as everything was kind of whirling around me and falling apart. I felt stable. I felt okay. I wasn't necessarily okay with everything that was happening, but there was this very deep and sure inner aspect of myself that knew this needed to happen. So I knew I needed to leave the Netherlands because finding a job there was going to take a bit of time. I didn't know the language and there were just a lot of barriers. So I thought, well, I'll go to France. I'm French. I speak the language. I've worked there. I've been to school there. I thought, oh, this is going to be easy. Let's do it. Funnily enough, when I went to France, looking back at it now, I had these assumptions. It was going to be easy. This was my home, my natal country, and it wasn't. But I was no longer the bendy reed. I was the oak tree. I was full of assumptions. I was telling myself, well, this is how my story goes now. The Netherlands was a dream that didn't work. I wasn't prepared to go back to Australia. And so France had to be it. That was almost like my life raft. I had to make this work. And I spent 4 weeks in France in total chaos. I literally couldn't make anything work. It was not easy. It was not, nothing went according to plan. And not even that it didn't go according to plan. I found it incredibly difficult to make anything work. So after 3 weeks of going through this and hitting my head against every brick wall, every closed door, the oak broke and I gave up. And there was a part of me that was like, oh, I'm back in the flow now because I'm realizing I can't make France work. I really do need to come back to Australia. But somewhere inside of me, the fear, it didn't feel like it felt when I was in the Netherlands. And it took me a long time to realize that I wasn't in the flow. I was just broken. I could no longer stand up as a solid oak against everything that wasn't working because I was broken. So I just resigned. I gave up and resigned myself to the fact that this isn't working. But the energy's not the same. And there was pain in both, there was discomfort in both, there was regret in both, there was unhappiness in both, there was worry in both. Yet in the flow in the Netherlands, I knew I would be okay. In the broken oak in France, I didn't think I would be okay. There were no pieces to pick up in the Netherlands because nothing was broken. But with what happened in France, I felt broken. I felt like there were so many pieces all over the floor, all over the place. How was I ever going to put myself back together to actually embrace life again, to actually make decisions and have dreams? So they literally flowed from one to the other. And it didn't start broken and ended up in the flow. I was in the flow and I became broken. And both are journeys in our life. Sometimes we will be in the flow and sometimes we'll be that broken oak. Sometimes we'll accept and sometimes we will reject. And that's all part of being human. And it's all situations and times in our life that we go through so we can grow. Back to that contrast video. And I'll link those videos that I've mentioned below. So I mentioned the video on resistance, on contrast. And there was another one, I think, but I'll go back through it and make sure that I list them all in the description below. So I'll have links there so you can access them. So, like I just mentioned in a piece of my story that I shared, is fear can live in both. Stress can live in both. Unhappiness and overwhelm can live in both. But there is a sense of peace that we find when we're in the flow because we know we're going to be okay. There's just this knowing. That we're going to be okay because being in the flow is a knowing also that we don't know what's going to happen and we're okay with that. So being in the flow is an energy of acceptance, of knowing that we don't know, of knowing that we'll be okay. It's knowing that we don't need to chase or control or grasp. We just need to take a moment to absorb where we are, what's happening around us. Coming back to how do we feel? Journaling, meditating, just sitting with what's happening, sitting within the chaos, but not becoming the chaos. So, as with always, I will write a blog on this topic. There'll be the journaling worksheets, there'll be the meditation. I'll have this video and the meditation video on Spotify as well if you prefer to listen. If you need assistance, if you need help, please reach out. You can book a one-on-one appointment with me and we can connect and go through and sit together. Go through this together. So I want to thank you so much for being here. I hope this discussion has helped you on your journey, on your path, and on becoming more in the flow. becoming more centered and grounded. So take very, very good care of yourselves. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.